maker Jonathan Alvendia, I will be reporting about the crisis in Europe that's unfolding right now. Over the past 3 years, the European migrant crisis has steadily become worse as refugees are not receiving the aid and assistance they require in order to integrate into their new communities. This has led an increased amount of radicalization by terrorist groups in the neighboring areas. An influx of migrants from Middle Eastern countries, Syria in particular, have caught European countries off guard. European nations have been unable to prepare properly as they were simply reacting to the crisis as it unfolded. If we want to prevent further radicalization from refugees, it's important that action is taken soon to improve their conditions.
I'm Grayson Naquin, and I'm the project manager of this team, and we are the systems engineers that will be analyzing this problem.
I'm Dr. Figueroa-Matos. I'll be the solutions analyst for this team.
And I'm Professor Nicholas Zalduendo. I teach at the prestigious Harvard College or University, whatever you choose. And I will be giving us an introduction to our problem that we're facing, a very serious problem. So the first point, due to the complexity of the refugee problem, it is important to note that no single company or organization can solve this problem. Therefore, it is in UComm's best interest to utilize the efforts and resources of the many organizations that are already taking part in solving this problem. In other words, we believe that UComm's most effective course of action is allocation of its $153 million budget as identified on the fact sheet. It is important to note that UComm, host countries, as well as the refugees themselves, are among the main stakeholders identified in this situation. After conducting interviews and surveys with the stakeholders, we were able to identify the stakeholders' interests. In order to effectively solve the refugee crisis, these are the 5 criteria that we deem must be satisfied. The first is humanitarian aid for refugees. This means providing food, water, and health services to refugees. The second is education for refugees. This is important because we want the kids to be functioning members of society one day. Additionally, we want them to be in a safe environment far away from terrorist organizations who are able to make a negative impact on these impressionable kids. Third is employment for refugees. We want adults to be able to have jobs in their new host countries. Fourth is transportation for refugees to new host countries. We want refugees to be able to cross borders safely. And lastly is the allocation of security. We'll make sure that borders are safe around countries.
In order to rank the criteria, we designed the swing weight matrix. We based their rankings off the level of importance and variation in measure ranges shown in the X and Y axis. The rankings are ranged from 0 to 100. We designated humanitarian aid as the most important with a weight of 100. Education received a 75, employment received a 65, transportation received a 35, and lastly, security received a 20. After developing the swing weights, we were able to assign each criteria a global weight. The global weights give each criteria a level of importance relative to the other criteria. This is calculated by dividing each swing weight by the sum of all the criteria's swing weights. Based off the global weights, you can see humanitarian aid is the most important.
This is our Zwicky's morphological box. This model helps us display and organize potential ideas and options for each of the 5 different categories that we deem necessary to solve the refugee crisis. As you can see, underneath each of the 5 different categories, we have different organizations in which we can allocate resources and funds towards that are already performing the operations necessary to solve the refugee crisis. As of right now, this Zwicky's model leaves us with 576 potential solutions. Not all these organizations can be chosen, therefore we need to screen to make sure and decide on which organization is the best in terms of allocating funds towards. After conducting further in-depth research of the different possible organizations listed in our Zwicky's model, we were able to narrow down our potential options to 2 organizations per category. This means that there are now 32 different possible solutions to decide between. Here you can see our feasibility screening matrix. This matrix helps to reduce the number of alternatives that must be considered by refining, combining, or eliminating those that do not meet the critical stakeholder requirements. The feasibility screening matrix scores each option on a score of 0 to 4 with regards to how research conveys its abilities to meet the needs of the stakeholders within each of the 5 categories. In other words, the threshold is each option's ability to meet the stakeholders' needs. For example, with regards to transportation, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, ORR, scored a 4 because not only do they transport refugees, but they also ensure that they become integrated citizens in their new country with welfare and cultural aspects. On the other hand, the UCOM personal bus system option scored a 1 because it did not guarantee safe, timely, nor reliable travel to Europe. Using the VLOOKUP and IF functions for this feasibility screening matrix, the feasibility screening matrix tallies our scores out of 20. We chose to make 17 the baseline to represent a GO plan that yielded an acceptable 85% or 17 out of 20 satisfaction rate from the stakeholders due to their needs being met. As a result, we found 4 possible candidate solutions, options 2, 5, 6, and 22. In accordance with our feasibility screening matrix, these are the 4 potential candidate solutions that our feasibility screening matrix revealed as the best courses of action to take in support of fulfilling the needs and requirements of the stakeholders. In other words, these 4 different combinations of organizations are where we believe UCOM's funds should be allocated. Although option 6 scores the highest by 1 point, each solution is a feasible course of action that is aimed at improving humanitarian aid, education of refugees, employment of refugees, allocation of security, and transportation for refugees, all in support of solving the refugee crisis.
Although we've identified our recommended potential candidate solutions, it is up to UCOM to decide which solution to take. Once a solution is decided upon, UCOM needs to allocate its $153 million to those different organizations. Here you can see our recommended budget allotments for each organization within the 5 different categories for the chosen solution. We believe that our global weight matrix dictates the importance of each criteria and therefore reveals how much money should be allotted to each category and organization. For example, if UCOM were to choose option 6, $52,020,000 would be allotted towards UNICEF for humanitarian aid, $38,250,000 would be allotted to UNESCO for education of refugees, $33,660,000 would be allotted towards improving the non-EU workers permit, $18,360,000 would be allocated to the ORR for transportation of refugees to their host country, and $10,710,000 would be used to improve biometric systems in order to improve security. By allocating their funds in this manner, we believe that UCOM will be taking the most effective course of action in helping to solve the refugee radicalization crisis.